I really encourage everyone to visit Nanjing, make friends there, and to see the Memorial Museum. China suffered 3 Holocausts. That's how many millions of Chinese people died during World War II from the Japanese invasion. 300,000 Chinese people died in the Nanjing Massacre alone, making it the largest massacre in history. To truly honor the Jewish and other European victims of German fascism, we need to do a better job of understanding fascism overall, including in Imperial Japan. That way, we can fight it anywhere it takes root. During World War II, China was the United States' ally, but we aren't taught much about that history anymore for political reasons. That's why most Americans have never even heard of the Nanjing Massacre, formerly known as the Rape of Nanking. And to this day, the Japanese government is still split on fully acknowledging and apologizing for the massacre. This summer, I visited the Memorial Hall in Nanjing to learn about this history and to share the victims' stories, which are more important now than ever, as we're witnessing constant civilian massacres carried out by fascist Israel. This is important but highly disturbing history. Please watch with care. In just 6 weeks, the Japanese military murdered 300,000 people in Nanjing. That would be like if 40 people were killed in your city before you finished this video. And cruelty was the Japanese army's official policy. They had to be cruel and dehumanize the Chinese to justify killing them for their land and resources. At the museum, I learned stories of countless atrocities of torture, entire facilities for the mass rape of women and girls, publicized killing competitions, and stories of the bloody corpses of mutilated families left in the snow to freeze together into a single mound of human flesh. From the very first days of the massacre, documents show that there were too many bodies to dispose of. The Japanese were murdering so many people that the bodies of their victims were getting in the way of murdering more, and soldiers began to complain of the constant putrid smell. There were too many bodies piled in the streets for the Japanese army's vehicles to drive over them. The bodies couldn't be burned or buried fast enough, and nearby ponds disappeared after being completely filled with corpses. The museum itself is located on a mass burial site where you can see the partially excavated human remains. One solution for the Japanese was to tie hundreds of civilians together and bring them to the Yangtze River for execution, so that their bodies could be quickly dumped into the river, but the thousands of bodies eventually even clogged the river. The corpses often washed back ashore or lodged into boats trying to pass. All this brutality started with Japan's Prince Asaka. Documents show that he gave a quote, "kill all captives" order, which instructed the Japanese army to immediately slaughter the tens of thousands of surrendered Chinese soldiers in Nanjing, when other armies at the time would have typically taken the troops as prisoners of war. Later, Japan's scorched earth policy they were using across China would be formalized into the 3 Alls directive: kill all, burn all, loot all. This systemized barbarism could also be seen in Japan's disturbing comfort stations, which were set up in Nanjing shortly after the massacre began. These were converted buildings used as mass rape facilities where Chinese and later Korean women and girls were held prisoner. They were raped and brutalized by dozens of Japanese soldiers per day, barely kept alive through the constant violence. Japan established these facilities across China and filled them with kidnapped Korean women and girls who were their colonial subjects at the time. There are also documents of barbaric killing contests, like one to see who could be the first to kill 100 Chinese civilians using a sword. The military used gruesome torture rituals and demonstrations to desensitize their soldiers and dehumanize the Chinese. Some of these included beheading contests, using civilians for bayonet practice, disemboweling pregnant women with bayonets, burning people alive, and feeding victims to dogs, all for fun and sport. And all of these events are thoroughly documented, even by some Japanese journalists who were appalled by their own army's brutality. And over the years, several Japanese veterans have given testimonies of the horrible things they saw or did. Many Chinese people kept records of the events as well, and survivors have shared their testimonies of what happened to them and their families. There are only 28 survivors remaining. They even have video footage of the massacre displayed at the Memorial Museum in Nanjing. This footage was recorded almost 90 years ago by American missionary John Magee. John Magee and several several other Americans and Europeans in Nanjing were doing missionary work when the Japanese invaded. They rose to the occasion and used their international status to protect Chinese civilians. The heroic American Minnie Vautrin saved up to 10,000 people, mostly women and girls the Japanese soldiers were trying to kidnap. Together, these heroes leveraged their international status to organize the Nanjing Safety Zone, which ultimately protected an estimated 250,000 civilians in their tight quarters. They also provided life-saving medical care for countless injured Chinese civilians. And at the head of the Nanjing Safety Zone Committee was German businessman John Rabe. Not everything in history is black and white. John Rabe was a member of the German Nazi Party, supporting his own country's genocidal fascist regime with his overseas business dealings. But it was his very affiliation with the Nazi Party that would successfully deter the Japanese soldiers. Because Japan and Nazi Germany were allies, John Rabe would show his swastika armband to command the Japanese soldiers to leave. He sheltered over 600 Chinese civilians in his own home alone, and his detailed diary entries became essential to learning the truth of the Nanjing Massacre. But to this day, Japan has never offered a full official apology for the Nanjing Massacre. Instead, its leaders have issued vague expressions of regret, while some nationalist politicians deny the slaughter even happened. Some Japanese history textbooks avoid using the word massacre, and they minimize the atrocities. China was left in ruins after World War II, and the civil war that followed drained what little resources remained. For decades after, they were blocked from trading with the rich Western powers, so by the 70s, they were desperate to be able to trade with Japan again, who was already becoming rich after $40 billion in today's dollars of aid from the United States. China received aid from the United States too, but a large amount of it went to the losing side of their civil war, which ultimately prolonged that conflict. And further aid was given to the ROC, not the PRC, which was the start of the divide that we see to this day between mainland China and Taiwan province. So in their negotiations to normalize relations and trade, Japan pressured China to relinquish the right to seek reparations or to prosecute war crimes. China openly agreed because they know more than anyone how invaluable peace truly is. And that was the part of the museum I really wasn't ready for. Despite all the pain and dehumanization the Chinese suffered, they still promote forgiveness, right there above the bodies of the victims. After all, it was the barbaric invaders who promoted racial division and hatred. Many people told me that they wouldn't want to visit Nanjing because of the sad history, but that's exactly what those Japanese soldiers would want. They wanted to wipe Nanjing off the face of the earth. They wanted Japan to completely subjugate China and to never see the two countries as peaceful, cooperative neighbors on equal footing. They would hate to see Nanjing rise from the ashes, and that's why it's so important to keep the truth alive and to visit Nanjing to be a part of its peaceful, prosperous future. There will always be a scar on Nanjing from this tragic history, but it was so inspiring and uplifting to make friends there and to see how far this beautiful city has come. I really encourage everyone to visit Nanjing, make friends there, and to see the Memorial Museum, which is a free museum, and if you'd like, you can consider donating for flowers to leave for the victims.